Welcome to Meinier Speaks official episode, first one. It's May 2026. The 2025 midterm posters are finally peeling off the walls, and of course, the Uni team is officially a crime scene. And while politicians are already planning their 2028 outfits, you're standing in a grocery aisle wondering why 1,000 pesos feels like 500, or you can't even pay for anything with that. But let's skip the fluff. As of this month, our national debt is sitting at around 18 trillion pesos. Let that sink in. We aren't just in debt, we are the debt. If you're a Filipino listening to this, your personal share of that bill is now over 157,000 roughly. So you didn't sign for the loan, you didn't see the money, but you and your kids are the collateral. Today, we are deep diving into the 6.7 trillion 2026 budget. They call it Agenda for Prosperity. I call it a ransom note. We're going to talk about why the ADB, just slashed our growth forecast to pathetic 4.4%. Why inflation is jumping to 5% this month. And why the Ayuda that they're giving you is just a bribe they paid for with high interest loan in your name. So this is section 1, the Ayuda Illusion. The Department of Budget and Management is bragging about the cleanest budget in history, 6.7 trillion pesos. Sounds impressive, right? Until you look at the debt service fund. In 2026, we are paying 950 billion pesos just on interest. Not the principal, not paying off the debt, just the interest to keep the banks from knocking on the door. But let's do the math here that they hope you're too resilient to do. 950 billion pesos for interest, compare that to the agriculture budget of 297 billion pesos. We are paying 3 times more to creditors than we are to the people who grow our food. We are paying more to banks than we are to our health sector, 448 billion roughly. Right, courtesy of Business Inquirer. In your house, if your house was burning down and you had 1,000 pesos, 1K, would you spend 700 of it paying interest on your credit card and 300 pesos on water to put out the fire? No. But that's exactly what the Philippine government is doing right now. And then comes the Ayuda scam. They've set aside 113 billion pesos for peace program and 63.9 billion pesos for protective services. They want you to feel grateful. Look, the government is helping, right? But we have let's not forget, let's add more context to this. We have 1.6 trillion budget deficit pesos. We don't have the money for that ayuda. We are borrowing that money. So how does that work? The government takes out a loan at a high interest rate, takes a massive cut for administrative costs and branding, of course, and then gives you 1K in an envelope. You think it's a gift, it's a payday loan. You're going to pay back 1.15 in taxes for that 1K blessing. Ayuda isn't a safety net, it's a dependency trap. They keep you poor enough to need the envelope so you're quiet enough to let them keep the change. Now, let's move on to the inflation lies and the rice myth, right? Let's talk about your kitchen table. Last month, inflation jumped to 4.1%. This month, May 2026, economists are are forecasting it to hit 5%. The government loves to blame global factors. They blame the Middle East, they blame oil, they blame the weather. But let's look at the National Rice Program, 30.2 billion pesos, and the Rice Competitiveness Fund, 30 billion again. We've poured billions into rice competitiveness, yet we are still the world's biggest rice importer. Why? Because the money isn't going to the farmers, it's going to farm to market roads, which is just code for construction contracts for my cousin's company. We are subsidizing imports while our local agriculture is on life support. The 20 pesos per kilo rice wasn't just a campaign promise, It was a mathematical insult. In 2026, with the peso hitting records low against the dollar, over 61 pesos as of last month, everything we import is more fucking expensive. When the peso drops, your 100 pesos bill doesn't buy 100 peso worth of stuff, it buys 80. The government is devaluing your labor to pay off their 18 trillion debt. They're literally shrinking your stomach to save their spreadsheets. But wait, we have infrastructure, right? 1.5 trillion pesos for Build Better More in the 2026 budget. We are building the North-South Commuter Railway, 28.8 billion pesos, and flood management, 250 billion pesos. On paper, it looks progressive, but ask yourself who is getting the contracts and who is the infrastructure for. We are building world-class bypass roads so the trucks of billionaires can move faster, while the average worker is still stuck in a 3-hour commute on a jeepney that's being phased out by a modernization plan they cannot afford. We cannot afford. We are a country that builds green cities while our actual cities are drowning in 250 billion worth of flood management that somehow never manages the flood. We are borrowing from the future to build monuments to the present. The ADB just slashed our growth to 4.4%. That's the tiger economy dying. We aren't growing, we are just spending. There's a difference between a business growing and a person maxing out their credit card at a mall. The Philippines is currently at the mall, and the security guard, the IMF, is starting to look at us funny, courtesy of the Manila Bulletin. So here's the reality check for May 2026. You are being taxed on your income, taxed on your food, taxed on your dreams to pay for a 950 billion interest bill that you didn't create. So that's what's happening right now. We have an 18 trillion peso roommate and is eating all our food while we pay the rent. If you're not angry yet, you're not paying attention. Now, we're going to move on to section 2, right? Our government loves to release surveys. Just last week, April 2026 OCTA research survey came out. They are celebrating because self-rated poverty dropped slightly to 35%. I want you to clap because only 9.2 million families say they are poor. But look at the fine print. They didn't put on the TikTok caption, self-rated food poverty rose to 31%. That is 8.1 million families who cannot afford to buy nutritious food. In Mindanao, that number is 53%. Over half of the families in Mindanao are food poor in a country that calls itself an agricultural powerhouse. So how did we get here? Let's look at the rice trap. Last year, the president signed EO 105. They called it a price index tariff system. It sounds technical, it sounds smart, but here's what actually is. It's a surrender. We have officially pegged our survival to the price of rice in Vietnam, courtesy of philstar.com. That's the information, that's my sources. If the price of Vietnam rice drops, our tariffs go up. If their prices goes up, our tariffs go down. We have outsourced our food security to a foreign country. Why? Because we have given up on the Filipino farmer. In this 2026 budget, they brag about 30 billion pesos for the Rice Competitiveness Enhancement Fund, RCEF, courtesy again of philstar.com. 30 billion, right? We're spending 950 billion pesos on debt interest. We're spending 30 times more on paying back banks than we are on making sure our farmers have seeds and tractors. And now look at the horizon, May 2026. The weather bureaus are already shouting about a super El Nino coming in June. The USDA is projecting we will need to import 5.1 million metric tons of rice this year, a record high. The Department of Agriculture says, no, only 3.8 million. That's what they said. Who do you trust? The guys who promise you 20 pesos per kilo of rice or the global experts who see our dams drying up? We are entering a food emergency with empty warehouses. The National Food Authority, NFA, only has enough rice for 7 to 15 days. If Vietnam has a bad harvest because of the same El Nino that will be projected to come here in June, in the next 2 months, we don't just have expensive rice, we have no rice because we keep importing them. This isn't bad luck, this is a political choice. They chose to fund bypass roads for malls instead of solar powered irrigation for farmers. They chose to import and take a cut of the tariffs instead of investing in the soil. They are literally starving the countryside to feed the import cartels in Manila. Now, let's move to the jobs they keep talking about. The NEDA, the National Economic Development Authority, is obsessed with the phrase upper middle income status. They want us to reach it by the end of 2026. They say our GNI per capita needs to hit $4,496. Right? Sound of bubble popping up. This is the middle income trap at its peak. On paper, the country is getting richer. The GDP is growing, even if the IMF just slashed the forecast to 4.1%. But look at who is getting that money. Yeah, let's look at it. In 2026, the top 1% Filipino families hold more wealth than the bottom 60% combined. When the government says the economy grew by 5%, they mean the malls made more money. The telecoms charge you more for slow data. And the real estate moguls sold more luxury condos in BGC. What about you? You're likely part of the underemployed. We have 5.8 million Filipinos who have jobs but are still looking for more work because their salary doesn't cover the Meralco bill. We are a nation of virtual assistants, BPO agents, and delivery riders. We aren't building anything, we aren't manufacturing anything, we are just service providers for the rest of the world. We are the world's back office. Why is this political failure? Because the service economy is fragile. If AI gets better, 1.5 million BPO jobs are at risk. And what is the government's plan for 2027 or 2028 when those jobs vanish? Their plan is the same as it was in the 70s. Export the people. In the 2026 budget, the Department of Migrant Workers got a massive boost. Why? Because the government has zero confidence in creating local industries. They have given up on the Philippines as a place of work. They see you as a remittance machine. Your only value to the state is the dollars you send back from a country that actually has a functioning economy. They don't want you to be an entrepreneur. They want you to be an export because an OFW doesn't protest in Mendiola. An OFW that just sends money and stays quiet. Now, let's move on to section 3. Let's talk about the soap opera in the Batasan. If you've been living under a rock, here's the update for May 2026. Vice President Sara Duterte is on the verge of being sent to the Senate for an impeachment trial. Just 2 days ago, on April 29, the House Committee on Justice voted 53-0 unanimous to find probable cause against her. 53-0. Remember 2022? Remember the green and red shirts hugging on stage? That Uniteam is now a crime scene. The House is voting on the plenary this Monday, May 4, to officially transmit the articles of impeachment to the Senate. But what are the charges, right? It's a buffet of scandals, misuse of confidential funds, unexplained wealth, and get this, alleged assassination threats against the president, the First Lady, and Speaker Martin Romualdez. The VP, Sara, says she was joking. The NBI says they are chasing leads to a contract killer. Whether it's real or just a political hit job, the economics of this are devastating. Well, while two most powerful families in the country are trying to send each other to jail, the peso is hitting 61 pesos to dollar. Investors are looking at the Philippines and seeing a banana republic with better malls. Why would anyone bring business or jobs here when the vice president is a no-show at her own impeachment? Because she's attending a pop-up exhibit in Laguna. Here, this is the peak. While the House is trying to destroy the Duterte dynasty, President Marcos is pushing for the anti-political dynasty bill. Malacanang is calling it the best version of the law. Best version, okay? Do you see the irony here? The bill is being pushed by Sandro Marcos and Martin Romualdez. We have the son of the president and the cousin of the president telling us that dynasties are bad for the country. Very ironic. This isn't a reform. This is a tactical strike. They're using the law to prune the competition. The 2025 midterms showed that the Dutertes still have a massive grip. Bongo took first place in the Senate with 25 million votes, and Bato was right behind him. The Duterte coalition still holds the line. But so what does this administration do? They don't try to outperform them, they try to outlaw them. The 2026 budget isn't a plan for the people, it's a war chest for 2028. The 1.5 trillion in build better, more infrastructure, that's not for your commute, that's for the local mayors and governors who need to be inspired to switch sides before the next presidential election. Politics in May 2026 isn't about governance, it's about surviving the purge. So, where does that leave you? Right? You're watching a House of Cards remake in Tagalog. You're watching Risa Hontiveros emerge as the chief architect of an opposition that's actually winning seat. You're watching Bam Aquino and Kiko Pangilinan back in the Senate, ready to judge a vice president. But while they play Game of Thrones, the price of galunggong is up. Your electricity is the highest in Asia. And our national debt is 18 trillion. The politicians are fighting for their lives. You should be fighting for your wallet, because at the end of this impeachment, at the end of this dynasty war, the only thing that's certain is that you, the normal, average Filipino citizen, are the one who will pay for the lawyers, the posters, and the broken promises. Section 4. If you are a Filipino who hates both the Marcoses and the Dutertes, welcome to the front row. In May 2026, we are watching a cannibalistic feast. The uni team that promised us unity in 2022 is now a toxic waste dump. On one side, you have the Marcos administration trying to rebrand the country as Bagong Pilipinas while spending 6.79 trillion pesos on a budget that critics call the sneakiest pork in history. On the other side, you have the Dutertes, the former president trying to stage a comeback as Davao mayor, and the vice president facing a plenary vote for impeachment this coming Monday. But let's be real. Neither of these families are fighting for you. They don't give a shit. The Marcoses and the Dutertes, they're basically the same side of the same coin. They're just fighting. That's it. They don't give a shit about us. But let's talk about Sara Duterte impeachment. On April 29, just a few days ago, the House Committee voted 53-0, remember, to find probable cause. So this isn't a justice. This isn't about justice. It's about political execution. And we also talk about the charges. Whether the threats are real or just bad fan fiction, the results is the same. The House of Representatives is being used as a guillotine. But don't think the guys holding the blade are the heroes. While they are trying to impeach the VP, they just passed the budget, the $6 trillion pesos budget, where 633 billion is being flagged as shadow pork. They are investigating Sara's Duterte 125 million pesos in confidential funds, which is right, but they are ignoring the 243 billion pesos in unprogrammed appropriations that are being diverted into flood controls projects owned by administration families. It's like a bank robber reporting a pickpocket to the police, right? Isn't that kind of funny? But here's the peak. The House led by Speaker Bojeday, who took over after Martin Romualdez had stepped back, is now seriously deliberating the anti-political dynasty bill. We have a Congress where nearly 80% of the members are from political dynasty, telling us they're going to ban political dynasties. It's like a pack of wolves voting to become vegans. But why now? Why after 40 years of ignoring the Constitution? Because the Marcos camp realized that the only way to stop another Duterte presidency in 2028 is to change the rules of the game. They aren't banning dynasties because they love democracy. They are banning dynasties because they want to prune the Duterte family tree before it grows back over Malacanang. And the Dutertes, they pivoted. They're now the opposition. The same family that gave us 6 years of kill, 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 and a record breaking debt is now talking about human rights and constitutional process. Oh my God. By the way, I hate these two families together, right? Give me a break. Rodrigo Duterte is facing an ICC investigation. His daughter is facing impeachment, and suddenly they are the defenders of marginalized. It's a joke. It's a comedy show where the ticket costs 18 trillion pesos and we're the only ones not laughing. So, where does this leave us? We're being told we have to choose a side. If you hate Marcos, you must be a DDS. If you hate Duterte, you must be a pink or dilawan. I'm here to tell you to reject that choice. In May 2026, the real opposition isn't a political party. It's the anti-corruption protest we're seeing in the streets. It's a trillion peso march, part 3. It's the people who realize that whether the president's name is Marcos or Duterte, the price of rice stays up. The debt stays growing and the families in Makati keeps getting richer. Okay, now let's move on to the golden family of Davao, right? I've been shit-talking the current administration, the Marcoses, since, the first second of this podcast. Now it's time for the other side. The same, they're also fucking demons as well, right? They're disgusting. For years, we were told that the Dutertes were the messiahs of the South. Disiplina, they said. Tapang at malasakit, they said. It's May 2026 and the only thing they've shown us is tapang sa korupsyon and malasakit sa sariling pamilya. Let's look at the trash pile one by one, right? As we speak, Rodrigo Duterte is currently facing the reality of the Hague. I don't know how to pronounce it. The ICC pretrial chamber unanimously confirmed the charges of crimes against humanity. The man who once said he'd jet ski to the Spratly Islands is now watching his life's legacy be picked apart by international judges. He promised to kill drug lords. Instead, he left us with a body count of thousands of poor Filipinos and a national debt that jumped from 6 trillion to 13 trillion during his administration. They don't want to talk about that. He didn't fix the country. He just maxed out the credit card and left us with the bill. The AMLLC, the Anti-Money Laundering Council, just dropped a nuke. They flagged 6.7 billion in suspicious and covered transaction linked to her and her husband Manases Carpio between 2006 and 2025. 6.7 billion pesos, by the way. And it gets dirtier. Former Senator Trillanes just presented documents at the House hearing alleging the entire family, Rodrigo, Sara, Paulo, Baste, and even Hanelet and Kitty, receive 181 million pesos in manager's checks from a guy named Samuel Uy. Who is Samuel Uy? He is an alleged drug lord and political contributor. Think about the irony. The family that built its brand on killing drug lords is allegedly taking millions in donations from one. That's not a dynasty, that's a protection racket. And then there's the spare heirs. Look at Paulo Duterte, currently being investigated for the flood control scandal and links to Pogos. Look at Baste Duterte, the acting mayor of Davao, because his dad got disqualified for not taking his oath on time. He's trying to play the rebel while his city is facing the same poverty and crime rates they promised to vanish 10 years ago. They are not defenders of the people. They are a family business that specializes in selling fear to the public and favors to their cronies like Michael Yang and the Farmali gang. The Davao myth was built on a lie that you have to give up your rights to get safety. Well, in 2026, we have no rights, no safety, and no money. All we have is a massive trillion pesos in debt. And a family in Davao trying to play victim while their bank accounts are overflowing. So when you see the Dutertes also crying on TikTok about political persecution, remember the 6.7 billion pesos in debt. When you see the Marcoses pushing an anti-dynasty bill, remember that they're only doing it to kill the competition. They are two sides of the same counterfeit coin. One dynasty uses intelligent funds to hide their loot. The other uses unprogrammed appropriations to feed their cronies. If you're still a fan of either of these families, you're not a citizen, you are a fangirl for your own oppressor. The Dutertes aren't trash because they lost power. They're trash because they used their power to treat this country like their personal piggy bank. Now, that is the Dutertes and Marcos and why I think both families are trash and they're fucking disgusting. So don't support them because they're basically your oppressors, you fucking idiots. Now, section 5, the energy shakedown. Why are you still paying for air, right? There's a high electricity bill right now going on through most of the country. We're going to talk about the energy scam and the shadow budget. If you're still with me, you're probably wondering, Meinier, why is my Meralco bill higher than my grocery bill? It's May 2026 and we still have the highest residential electricity prices in Southeast Asia at roughly 10.55 pesos per kilowatt. We are paying double what they pay in Malaysia or Thailand. Why? Is it because we don't have enough plants? No, it's because of a law called IPIRA, Electric Power Industry Reform Act. Deep dive, right? In the Philippines, we have a market for power, but it's a fake market. When a major plant goes offline, which happens suspiciously often during hot months of May, the price of power on the spot market spikes. It's a shakedown. The generation companies, Gencos, owned by the same five families we talk about, can shut down for maintenance whenever they want, forcing the price up, and because of our laws, they can pass that cost directly to you. They don't lose money when they fail, you pay for their failure. We are the only country in the world where the customer pays for the power of the company that didn't produce. Talk about the 13 foreign investment negative lists issued just last month, right? The government is bragging the renewable energy is now open to 100% foreign ownership. They tell you this will lower the prices. It won't. Why? Because the transmission and distribution are still monopolies. You can have the cheapest solar power in the world, but if the wires to your house are owned by a monopoly, they will still charge you whatever they want to deliver. Opening up the energy source without breaking the distribution monopoly is like opening 1,000 water springs but letting one guy own all the pipes. You're still thirsty and is still rich. And let's talk about the 6.7 trillion budget again. We talk about the debt, but we didn't talk about the unprogrammed appropriations. In the 2026 budget, there's roughly 633 billion pesos in what economists call shadow pork. These are funds that aren't tied to a specific project until after the project is passed. When a budget is unprogrammed, it means the Department of Public Works or the Department of Transportation can move that money wherever they want based on excess revenue. Right? Do we have excess revenue? No. We have an 18 trillion pesos debt. But they use this legal loophole to create a slush fund. This 633 billion pesos is the gas in the political machine for the 2028 election. This is the money that buys the loyalty of the governors and the mayors. It's flood control that never stops to rain. It's farm-to-market roads that end at a private resort. And we can tie this with the Sara Duterte impeachment, right? The House is crucifying the VP over 125 million pesos in confidential funds. And they should. That money was spent in 11 days without a receipt. Alright? Walang resibo. 11 days. Gone. But don't let the Speaker or the President act like saints. They are investigating 125 million whole while they are sitting on a 633 billion pesos mountain of unvetted, unprogrammed cash. It's a distraction. They want you to focus on the VP's grave threats and confidential funds so you don't ask why the 2026 budget has enough shadow pork to buy every voter in the country twice over, all right? Um I want to end this by talking about us, the Filipinos. Why do we let this happen? It's because of a word I hate, resilience. I hate it. Resilience is the favorite word of every corrupt politician in this country. When the floods come because the 250 billion pesos flood funds was stolen, they show a video of a Filipino smiling in a neck deep water and call it resilience. When the price of rice hits 60 pesos per kilo, they show a lola eating salt and rice and call it discarte. Resilience is the anesthesia of the poor. As long as we're proud of our ability to suffer, they will keep making us suffer. They have turned our survival into a personality trait so they don't have to turn it into a policy. In May 2026, we shouldn't be resilient. We should be demanding. We shouldn't be proud that we can survive on 157,000 pesos of debt. We should be furious that we were never asked if we wanted it. And that will be the end of the first official episode of Meinier Speaks. We have covered the 18 trillion pesos debt. We've covered the 5% inflation. We've covered the dying dynasties and the energy shakedown. If you listen to this whole episode, you now know more about the mechanics of your own poverty than 90% of the people in the malls. So don't just sit on this info. Use it the next time someone tells you Bagong Pilipinas is working. Ask them why your interest payments are higher than our health budget. The next time someone says Duterte is the Messiah, Duterte, tutulong ng bansa natin, ask them where the 6.7 billion pesos in suspicious transactions went. Right? The only way to break a dynasty is to stop being a fan and start being a shareholder. This is Meinier Speaks. So turn off the podcast and go look at your electric bill. That's the real horror story. See you next week or next month. Who knows?